Hello, welcome. Today we're going to be discussing how to access the higher planes of existence, according to Rudolf Steiner and the book Knowledge of Higher Worlds. And we're going to be going into it from a standpoint of initiation, step by step, how it was laid out, how we can utilize the teachings of that beautiful book, put into action, and actually start having experiences in the higher realities and begin to become aware of our true self while practicing the path. So step one, Western Western and Eastern, and Eastern would be called Bhakti Yoga. You begin to develop a sense of devotion in the heart. This sense of devotion wasn't there before and has to be cultivated. It could have been brought about through past experiences that were unconscious before you'd say you're aware of what's going on in your inner initiations, but it can come about gradually or all of a sudden. It could happen from like a life event, but it also could have happened by, perhaps aspiring to one of the higher archetypal beings. So for example, if there's access to like a hero or access to one of the higher solar gods, such as like Krishna or Christ. In my day and age, it was, we played games like Zelda, and our heroes were Link, or we had Goku as our heroes, different heroes that we look up to and show reverence to. We develop a sense of devotion because these characters are the solar personality archetypes that are manifested in these different forms here in the material world so that we can communicate with those individual dimensions. So before, when we're living life from an unconscious state of existence, we don't have a sense of devotion or reverence to anything higher than ourselves. So once we develop these inner faculties and we begin to really question our reality and inquire into the feeling of the sense of I am, really important to inquire into that sense of being, to know that you're actually a living being and what that feels like, and to know that you must have emanated from somewhere. You must have descended or crystallized from something, or you were a seed that is going to grow, but that seed must have come from another tree. You begin to ask these questions, very related to like Marsilio Ficino and the planets within. Venus rules those questions. Who am I? Where do I come from? Where am I going? Because Venus rules the birth into the physical realm, the sexual organs, as well as the higher celestial individualization. So we have to acquire devotion and reverence and slowly begin to esteem higher truths in what we've been led to believe in any typical societal situation or through school. We now are able to develop a sense of esteem for higher truths that are passed down from the ancients. And my number one recommendation, especially in this age, is just to read some of the best books handed down through history. The Tao Te Ching, the Upanishads, the Old Testament, the New Testament, I Ching, and also there's a lot of books from modern day people that were enlightened and inspired, and you can look at them as well. But these books that are written, they're called like solar books or holy books, helio books, sun books, because they contain the utmost highest supernal wisdom that's crystallized and condensed into form, and then written by seers that see these inner realities and are able to transcribe the invisible and make the invisible visible. So this feeling of devotion that we call in the East Bhakti Yoga, which is done through various means, it could be contemplating an inner sense of connection to the higher being. So they say worship Krishna. Well, Krishna is the self, the inner being that projects from itself to have individual smaller selves, i.e. myself. Everyone has this self, this center. That center is Krishna. That center is Christ, or the inner being that's connected to the supreme Christ, the higher essence, or the higher archetypal beings. The higher being's energy feeds the consciousness of all the inferior, i.e. qualitatively the same but quantitatively inferior dimensional beings. And these dimensional beings have a sense of reverence and a sense of service to that higher platform, because that higher energy, according to Alvin Boyd Kuhn, actually has to sacrifice itself and almost die to itself spiritually and give life to these lower forms. So since we're in the physical world and we're living, we actually, like we could say like a higher being kind of spiritually, or it's immortal, but technically like spiritually sacrificed itself to give life to physical living beings. So I'd recommend reading the book Alvin Boyd Kuhn, Lost Keys to the Scriptures, to understand the mysteries of death, or watch the first video I released, Mysteries of Life and Death. So this feeling of devotion slowly promotes the inner growth. And this is all, Rudolf Steiner made it very clear that this is acquired through your life experiences from day to day. You have to extract the transcendental meaning, the transcendental lessons, the initiations from your day-to-day life, your day-to-day journey. These are things that you have to actually live. You can't study it. No matter how much you study, you cannot study yourself into the higher planes of existence. It has to be acquired through your everyday life experiences, and your higher inner angelic life force or intelligent being is always giving you these opportunities that you need to either grow, to learn, whether they be like lessons of justice, a little more harsh, or more mercy lessons, a little bit more easy. It's trying to help awaken your understanding so that you can live out that wisdom, live out that truth, and essentially rise up to meet the standards of your higher being or your inner self. You're pulling the personality up and the higher forces down, and they're meeting in the middle, and they're forming that third being, the Christified initiate. So step 2, now that you are gaining your reverence, I recommend chanting Hare Krishna 16 times a day, saying the Lord's Prayer, doing there's a lot of cool prayers from the Quran. There's different traditions. There's bringing anything to get you to those higher states of consciousness, to have a sense of awe or a sense of epiphany, a sense of wonder. You're trying to stimulate a sense of the unknown, something higher than yourself, or at least inquiring into your inner self and touching that invisible part of yourself without touching it physically, but placing your awareness or attention on the center of the I am that emanates from this inner spinal column. You have Joaquin and Boaz, and then you have the middle column. That middle column is where that consciousness emanates from the strongest. And you put your attention there, you can kind of merge with it. So step 2, withhold judgment and criticism and replace it with the sense of devotion. So acquire admiration, devotion, and respect. And these 3 things combined opens up the insight, or the receptive third eye. Having respect, admiration, and devotion, so devoting yourself to something higher than yourself, a higher ideal, admiring and being able to see beauty, because if you aren't able to develop an admiration for the higher truths and esteem the beauty in the seasons and the waves and the cycles and the ebbs and flows, then you won't be able to extract the small, subtle messages that the Creator deposits in the physical realm for us to see. So you have to admire these things as kind of like you were when you were a kid. Jesus says, become as little children. You have to wake up this sense of admiration, the sense of curiosity. Mix that with the sense of devotion, and finally have respect for all beings, respect for yourself, and even respect for the realms that you feel are more unconscious, the plant, the mineral, the all the elementals, the gnomes, the sylphs, the Udines, the mermaids. We'll get into that. They're essentially akin to the tattvas of the Eastern tradition, the 4 elements that are actually subatomically or astrally individual creatures that are on a different wavelength of consciousness than human beings, as well as animals. So they're not animals or human beings. So step 3, we must retire and take time for silent moments and completely retire, to be receptive of thoughts that have nothing to do with our physical day-to-day life or anything that we do on a physical day-to-day basis. We have to completely escape our physical day-to-day routine that has anything to do with our work, our family, our social life, our projects, and we have to look at ourselves as if we're someone else completely, and take about 30 minutes to an hour of actually just sitting there, think about nothing for a long time until you enter that state where you feel like you're extracted from your personal ego story or the story of your waking state, so that you can actually see it from a perspective outside of the daily routines, unattached to previous memories. So how the part of your inner self and actions that is purely spiritual, and then through the silent contemplation, the thought world begins to come alive. And these thoughts are actually going to be speaking to you. And it must be remembered, according to Rudolf Steiner, that these higher beings in the higher worlds communicate to you through your own thoughts and your own feelings. So if you're waiting to hear a voice that's not yours, or see a being that's not you or something like that, know that the invisible world communicates to you through your thoughts. You just have to shut down the monkey mind of the self-created thoughts, enter the bosom of silence, and be receptive to those higher thoughts. And by doing step 1 and step 2, you will create the foundation for those effects. So something living actually speaks to us in a stream of thought, or a stream of consciousness. This is actually an outer intelligence. It's not just you. It's not everything. It's just you. Yes, there is consciousness. We're all connected to it, but there's actually other higher intelligent realities and beings that have interest in our lives. That's what they do. And we become very contemplative, reflective. This is activating the pineal gland. And we start to develop an attitude towards our thoughts and feelings that they're actually real tangible realities, that our thoughts can hurt people, that our emotions and thoughts, even though they're private, they have an actual impact on the physical world and other people. So you have to be very, very careful. Rudolf Steiner talks about the 3 steps. There's the preparation period, cultivation of thought and feeling. So you're working with your mental body and your feeling body. And through that, we're doing the Franz Barton Hermetic initiation of Hermetics to develop the mind and the thinking, as well as the emotional body through developing feeling. And when this is combined, you start activating that contemplative reflection. And you'll be able to have a clear space within where you have deep thoughts, and these thoughts are kindled by higher realities. And in this state of mind, you can read the scriptures or the ancient books and meditate on the verses. Now, it's interesting that step 2 is enlightenment, and then step 3 is initiation. It's not preparation, initiation, and then enlightenment. You have to become enlightened before initiation, because enlightenment is different than self-illumination. Anyone and many people can become enlightened. Enlightened is the first step, kind of like the water baptism. John the Baptist baptizes Jesus and he becomes the Son of God. He says, prepare for the next one will be the baptism of fire. This is talking about different initiations, different states of consciousness, and different levels of compassion and unconditional love that you unlock in the heart, that ends up purifying yourself of your defects so that you ascend that ladder back to heaven. And at the same time, you're spiritualizing your physical vessel, interfacing the spiritual with the physical. So you'll be able to actually pierce your thoughts and have and pierce through using the mercurial consciousness, activating the consciousness of Mercury, which is your transcendental awareness, which allows you to extract from the mundane the supernatural perceptions, which are not really supernatural, but it's natural. But in terms they call it supernatural, we should just call it super sensible or more subtle realities. And finally, step 4 is we seek the higher self within, the soul within. Seek and you shall find, knock and it shall be answered. We begin to completely lose all hesitation and lose anything that distracts us from the inner spirit. So anything that throws off our alarms or our sensors that says, hey, we're not on the right path, we're not doing what's best for the higher aspect of our soul, we have to begin to discard. Analyzing bad habits, bad behaviors, bad destructive patterns all need to be analyzed with this in step 2 or step 3, where we become that kind of hermit for like an hour a day. We use that to work on ourselves. And then throughout the whole day, we stay conscious, try to become aware so that we awaken in the astral plane and that information is given to us so that we know what we need to work on next. So this is how we apply the higher knowledge in a step-by-step fashion to begin to work on your higher self. And at that time, it's good. Rudolf Steiner says, work on yourself, but leave it up to the higher self and the higher beings to fully unlock the final enlightenment. So don't be seeking for reward. And it must be completely for others and not the self. Do not excuse any weakness and recognize all negative traits, because all of the defects must be obliterated and annihilated by the fire of the Kundalini and the Divine Mother. And we're going to be talking about that in the next video as well. Please check out my website down below. I'm doing consultation. I have plenty of articles to read, a couple of an access to a book that just to help spread this awareness to unlock these different perspectives and be able to bring more purpose to our lives. So thank you. Bye.